Disclaimer. The video serves informational and entertainment purpose only. The content is considered speculative and should not be treated as confirmed fact. We encourage you to conduct your research and form your conclusion.
Where Downey Jr. pointed out to both Marvel and Disney that this could not only ruin his reputation, but also cost him fans, and he's against making those statements. However, both Bob and Kevin informed him that taking part in these types of statements and the press tour for Ironheart is built into his very expensive contract for the future of the MCU, mostly related to the return in Avengers Doomsday. RDJ is already challenging both Bob Iger and Kevin Feige that he will only make statements defending Ironheart and Riri Williams if it avoids arguments about DEI.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark gets like back somehow, and there's like a moment where she's flying through and he's like, "Who is that?" And she's like, "I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark." And he's like, "I like that girl." And then
they also had Robert Downey Jr. and they had him roll out and really kind of prop the show up and prop the character of Riri Williams up above Tony Stark, and really tried to really have him really as the face of the Ironheart press tour, and it really just backfired completely. Bob and Kevin refused, and they are forcing him to make statements to go against Marvel fans that are opposed to the Riri Williams character. Now, RDJ is also very annoyed with Marvel and Disney after they initially forced him to do PR and become a part of the press tour, since it was built into his contract for Doomsday. With the show, per recall, when they forced Robert Downey Jr., they made a deal with him to take part in the press tour to prop up Riri Williams, played by Dominique Thorne, on multiple talk show programs out there, a lot of which were, of course, affiliated with Disney. We'll talk more about that down the road. However, this is where it gets really intense, because we know that Robert Downey Jr. is a very busy man right now. He is heavily involved with Avengers Doomsday.
It all started with a call. Not a cameo, not a contract update, but a crisis. The ratings for Ironheart were tanking. Fan backlash had reached a boiling point. Social media was erupting with memes, mockery, and furious threads. Disney and Marvel Studios were officially in panic mode. So what do they do when everything falls apart? They call in their biggest gun, Robert Downey Jr. But this wasn't Iron Man saving the day. This was a man blindsided. See, RDJ wasn't supposed to be part of this. His contract, tied to Avengers Doomsday, did include limited promotional duties. But Marvel twisted those words into something far more dangerous. They wanted him not just to promote Ironheart, but to be the face of it, to validate it, to shield it. They expected him to stand tall, smile wide, and tell fans that Riri Williams was the future, and that anyone who disagreed, they just didn't get it. Except RDJ didn't sign up for this war. Inside sources say when Bob Iger and Kevin Feige reached out, they didn't just ask. They pressured. They told him his support was crucial. They said his presence could turn the tide. But what they really wanted was for him to silence the critics, to play peacemaker in a battle he didn't start. And that moment, that call, was when Robert Downey Jr. realized something. He was no longer being asked to lead. He was being used. It was supposed to be a masterstroke, the return of Robert Downey Jr., not in armor, but in spirit. He appeared on talk shows. He smiled, cracked jokes, and praised Ironheart like it was the second coming of the MCU. Dominique Thorne? Brilliant. Riri Williams? A worthy successor. The studio wanted warmth, familiarity, legacy. They wanted Tony Stark to anoint the next generation. But something was off. Fans saw it immediately. This wasn't the RDJ they remembered. The charm was still there, but the soul? Missing. Every word sounded like it had been written in a Disney boardroom, polished by PR teams, and handed to him minutes before cameras rolled. His usual sparkle, that effortless charisma that made us all believe Iron Man was real, had been replaced with corporate stiffness, like a man reading lines he didn't believe in. The internet noticed. Comments flooded in. Why does this feel so fake? Is he being forced to say this? This isn't RDJ. This is damage control. What Marvel thought would be a slam dunk became a cringe compilation across YouTube. The praise didn't rebuild trust, it torched it. Fans felt insulted, like their loyalty was being manipulated. And worst of all, RDJ knew it. Behind the scenes, insiders say he was already growing uneasy. This wasn't a torch-passing moment. This was a forced coronation, and it was falling apart in real time. Marvel didn't just misfire, they misread the entire room.
Major development that is now active involves drama surrounding Robert Downey Jr. in the midst of the Ironheart ratings nightmare. Now, already Robert Downey Jr. is enraged with both Disney and Marvel, as well as Marvel fans. Already Bob Iger and Kevin Feige held a recent emergency call/meeting that included Robert Downey Jr. remotely, where they were pressuring him to make a Kevin Feige and even Dominique Thorne heading into complete damage control to really take control of the situation, and so far that has worked to no avail. Well, this is exactly what's been going on now, to the point where Bob Iger and Kevin Feige are getting involved in a lot of drama with RDJ, Robert Downey Jr.
Behind the cameras, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't smiling. In fact, he was livid. What fans saw on screen, the forced praise, the uncomfortable interviews, was just the surface. Behind closed doors, Downey was already clashing with Marvel's top brass. Sources say an emergency video call was arranged. On one side, Bob Iger and Kevin Feige, calm but firm. On the other, a frustrated RDJ, staring into the screen, arms crossed, barely containing his disbelief. The studio's request? Not just to praise Ironheart, but to defend it, loudly and publicly, to confront fan backlash, to address misogyny, DEI resistance, and toxic fandom. They wanted him to go to war for a show he had no creative control over, and to do it under the Marvel flag. Downey pushed back, hard. He told them flat out, "I won't be your mouthpiece." He wasn't against diversity. He wasn't even against the character. But what he was against? Being weaponized to shame the very fan base that built his legacy. He argued that criticism should be heard, not silenced. That not every bad review was rooted in hate. And that forcing a legacy actor to issue blanket defenses wasn't just risky, it was manipulative. Downey wasn't just resisting PR spin, he was protecting something far more important: authenticity, the trust he built over a decade with fans. And for the first time, Robert Downey Jr., the face of Marvel, was openly challenging the machine that made him a legend. For Robert Downey Jr., this wasn't just a disagreement, this was a betrayal. When he first signed on for Avengers, Doomsday, the contract was clear. There were promotional duties, yes, but Marvel sold it as supportive cameos, brief appearances to help bridge generations. Nothing controversial, nothing polarizing, nothing like this. But once Ironheart began to tank, that same contract was suddenly weaponized. Downey found himself being used not as a guest star, but as a cleanup crew. Behind the curtain, it was a bait and switch. Executives reportedly promised that RDJ's mere presence would guarantee a ratings lift, that he was the secret ingredient, the fix, that fans would rally behind Riri Williams if he gave the nod. But instead, the opposite happened. Ratings kept dropping, backlash intensified, and Downey's name was now being dragged into a mess he never agreed to fix. And he knew it. In private calls, Downey told insiders he felt used, lied to, that his goodwill was exploited under false pretenses. He wasn't angry that Ironheart failed. He was angry that the fallout landed on him. And when the studio insisted on further promotion, further defenses, he realized they never wanted a bridge. They wanted a shield, something to absorb the blow. And RDJ, the man who once lifted Marvel out of obscurity, now felt like a pawn in a game he never wanted to play. This wasn't just a miscommunication. This was Marvel, breaking trust with the one man they couldn't afford to lose. This is where things boiled over. After the fallout from Ironheart's reception, Marvel didn't just ask Robert Downey Jr. to support the show. They wanted him to pick a side. During what insiders describe as a heated emergency video call, Bob Iger and Kevin Feige reportedly pressured RDJ to release a public statement, not about the show's quality, not about Dominique Thorne's performance, but about the backlash itself. They wanted him to confront the critics head-on, to condemn what they called toxic fandom, to label the negative response as misogyny, sexism, anti-DEI hysteria. In short, they wanted Downey to scold the very audience that made him a legend. And he refused. Not out of spite, not out of ego, but out of principle, because Downey knew exactly what was happening. He was being turned into a mouthpiece for a war he never signed up to fight, one that framed creative criticism as hate, one that painted fans as villains. And RDJ wasn't having it. He told them flat out, "I won't alienate the people who built my career." He made it clear that while he supported inclusion and new voices in the MCU, he wouldn't play into narratives that labeled all dissent as bigotry. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a crisis of identity. Marvel wanted a savior. But Downey wasn't willing to sacrifice authenticity just to rescue a failing show. He wasn't Iron Man in this moment. He was Robert Downey Jr., and this time he was drawing the line. As Robert Downey Jr. stood his ground, something seismic was brewing outside the boardrooms. The fans, the real engine of the Marvel machine, had already started their rebellion. Social media lit up with fury and disbelief. It wasn't just Ironheart getting roasted. It was the entire Marvel strategy. The audience could feel it. This wasn't about bad storytelling anymore. This was about being lectured instead of entertained, guilt-tripped instead of inspired. Reddit threads dissected RDJ's interviews. YouTube exploded with breakdowns of how the once grounded MCU was now using its biggest star as a PR shield. One viral post put it perfectly. If Robert Downey Jr. can't save your show, maybe the problem isn't the fans, maybe it's the show. Fans weren't rejecting Ironheart because of its cast. They were rejecting the tone-deaf marketing, the manipulative messaging, and the corporate arrogance that expected them to cheer no matter what. And using Downey, their Iron Man, as a weapon against them, that was the last straw. This wasn't Backlash. This was a revolt, a declaration that nostalgia isn't enough, that legacy can't be faked, and that respect has to be earned, not assumed. Marvel called in the cavalry. The cavalry turned around and said, "You're on your own." And for the first time, it became clear, Marvel wasn't fighting trolls. It was fighting its own fan base, and losing. The whole point of Ironheart was supposed to be a passing of the torch. Riri Williams, the brilliant young inventor, rising from the ashes of Tony Stark's legacy, forging her own identity with the blessing of the man in the suit. But instead of a warm handoff, what fans witnessed felt like a betrayal, not a legacy. Marvel tried to craft this symbolic moment. Robert Downey Jr., the old guard, endorsing the new face of tech-powered heroism, but the way it was executed, painfully forced. The script didn't sing, it sighed. Downey's interviews read more like damage control memos than heartfelt endorsements. "She's the future," he said, but his eyes said, "They told me to say this," and fans picked up on it fast. The emotional weight Marvel hoped for, that gut punch of watching a legend embrace his successor, never landed. Instead, it backfired, because Marvel wasn't just passing the torch, they were burning the bridge. They turned Riri Williams into a marketing pawn, skipping the slow, earned journey audiences once saw with Iron Man. No origin that hit home, no stakes that felt real, just a corporate mandate screaming, "Love her because we said so." Worse yet, it put RDJ, the heart of the MCU, in the crossfire. Fans didn't blame Riri, they blamed the machine, and Downey, trapped in the gears, could only watch as everything he helped build began to collapse under the weight of forced symbolism and fake sincerity. Robert Downey Jr. was never supposed to be just a brand ambassador. He was the brand. For over a decade, he carried the MCU on his back, through risks, reshoots, rewrites, and every gamble Marvel threw at him. He earned every cheer, every tear, every box office record. And now, that legacy is being twisted into a tool to clean up someone else's disaster. He's had enough. In emergency meetings with Bob Iger and Kevin Feige, RDJ didn't just object, he fought back. Calm at first, then fiery. He laid it out. He wouldn't be the studio's shield against fan criticism. He wouldn't gaslight audiences. He wouldn't weaponize his legacy to defend a product that, in his own words, was never built to honor what we created. It wasn't about DEI. It wasn't about Riri Williams. It was about the trust between an icon and the people who believed in him, and Marvel broke it. Downey knew the cost. Speaking up meant risking everything: future contracts, executive goodwill, even Avengers, Doomsday. But he still said it. He made it clear, No more forced press. No more empty sound bites. No more being dragged into ideological battles that should have never touched the screen. It was his line in the sand. And in that moment, RDJ stopped being Marvel's pawn and became Tony Stark again. Not the CGI one, not the scripted one, but the real one. A man standing alone, telling the empire he helped build, "I am not your mouthpiece. I am Iron Man."